Okay, is everybody good? Negate. Contention 1 is entrenching supremacy. Bullard of Texas Southern University writes that for the last few decades, racial prejudice has been the principal decision maker behind infrastructure-related policies in the United States. Historically, the New York Times explains that government housing policies have pushed minorities into segregated inner-city neighborhoods with high poverty rates and few opportunities for escape. According to McCarthy of Smith College, this ongoing American legacy of institutional racism has denied millions of blacks the infrastructure necessary to address unemployment, political exploitation, and other social problems. Prioritizing infrastructure magnifies this oppression in two ways. The first is the distribution gap. Avila of the University of Minnesota argues that the financing of infrastructure follows the inscriptions of race and class. While spending within affluent communities is generous, it is minimal or absent in regions where the poor are historically concentrated. Randazzo of the Reason Foundation confirms that more than 85% of all government infrastructure grants went to communities with household incomes far above the national average. The second is urban dislocation. Soman of George Mason University observes that governments typically use new infrastructure projects as excuses to target and remove racial minorities. Lipsitz of UC Santa Barbara empirically confirms that federally assisted renewal projects destroy black housing units 2 times more often than white ones. Dislocation intensifies inequality, as Hartman of the American Bar Association points out that the cost of living for those forced out of their homes is 53% higher. Contention 2 is breaking the cycle. Pettinger of the Center for Economic Health contends that the primary purpose of welfare is to maintain a minimum standard of living for those suffering difficult times to foster upward mobility later down the road. However, Cohen of the nonprofit Quarterly reports that Congress has turned a deaf ear to safety net programs with funding requests for welfare billions of dollars below the budgetary requests. Prioritizing welfare solves intergenerational poverty. This happens in 2 ways, and the first is child poverty. Greenstein of the Center for Budget and Policy Priorities explains that welfare helps families with children afford basic necessities to improve longer-term outcomes. The safety net reduces the burst of stress factors that parents and children experience if they can't put food on the table, thereby easing negative effects that poverty has on neurological development early in life. Luckily, Jusko of Stanford explains that the safety net covers around 47% of financial support necessary to cover an entire family's basic necessities, freeing up time and resources that can be refocused towards job searches and education. The Public Policy Institute of California adds that safety net programs ameliorate issues like food insecurity, homelessness, and inadequate health care, all of which hurt children disproportionately. DeLuca of the Century Foundation continues that welfare prevents social reproduction, where children are stuck in the same social class as their parents. The CDF thus indicates that expanding underfunded welfare programs would cut child poverty by 60% and increase access to resources for 43 million kids. On the long term, people are 3 times more likely to fall back into poverty after being poor early in life. But the second is family makeup. The St. John's Law Review notes that the reason behind declining marriage rates in America is an increased incidence of poverty. Coons of CNN warns that economic insecurity makes family formation less likely and family dissolution more likely, as couples are unwilling to marry if they don't have the financial independence necessary to move into a new home or bear the cost of child rearing. McLanahan of Princeton thus writes that reducing incidences of poverty with single mothers is the most effective tool for protecting children from the negative consequences of family disruption, and that if unmarried individuals were more economically secure, they would take more time in deliberating relationships, finding better partners, and making remarriage more feasible. Yoshikawa of NYU notes that a $1,000 boost in welfare generosity is associated with a 108% increase in the incidence of stable family formation. Wilcox of Slate finds that in comparison to every other manageable influence on inequality, family structure is by far the strongest and most robust predictor of upward mobility. Because children from stable 2-parent families experience more parental attention and higher household incomes, the U.S. Census Bureau finds that 2 single-parent homes were 4 times more vulnerable to severe poverty. Perry of the AEI writes that without means-tested welfare programs, income inequality would be 50% higher in America. And for all these reasons, we are very proud to engage.
Can I see Yoshihara? Full PDF if you have it.
I think I only have the cards, so fine.
Can you just look up the PDF on the internet? You can use it or
The internet's really bad in here. I can try that.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
It's not really opening. Can I just show you? If you have questions.
Yeah, if we need a PDF, I'll ask for it.
Okay. Can I flash it to you so I can use
That'd be actually really great.
Okay. And if you want to try looking it up on your computer, maybe it'll work.
Wait, have you opened in PDF or is it just the card?
I was trying to PDF, but I can just put the card.
No, the card is fine. Sorry.
Okay.
Here.
And the file name is called Hawken. Let me know if you have trouble with it.
Yeah, sure. Do the judges mind if I just not take prep while I'm opening up the document?
Yeah, it's... Sorry that took a while.
No worries. Yeah, it's open document. We'll start taking prep now. Alright, thanks. Good 10 seconds used.
You guys are gonna keep track of your own what you've used, right?
Yeah, wait down. Alright. Alrighty. Amar and I affirm in Contention 1 is America works. Revitalizing America's infrastructure can create and enable access to good jobs for Americans everywhere. Currently, the American Society for Civil Engineers gives America's infrastructure a D+ rating, and the U.S. government is still projected to underinvest by nearly half the total cost needed. This crisis presents a crucial opportunity to address the failure of markets to produce meaningful employment. Dean Baker 13 of the Center for Economic and Policy Research explains that while there is a sufficient amount of skilled and unskilled workers to fill jobs, the market is not providing enough gainful employment opportunities for all comers into the workforce. Addressing the poor state of our infrastructure in a period of high unemployment would be the perfect marriage of demand and supply. Prioritizing increased spending on public infrastructure alleviates income inequality in two ways. First, Gillian White writes to The Atlantic in 2015 that investment in public infrastructure and public transit disproportionately prevents the poor from access to economic opportunity and re-entrenches it due to its inefficiency and infrequent access. Michaela Bouchard 15 of the New York Times adds, for many low-income people, commuting time has emerged as the single strongest factor in the odds of escaping poverty. Strength Clear 14 of the Washington Post writes that increased spending on public infrastructure would make our roads great again, decreasing commute times by, for example, expanding the reach of subways and bus services in cities. Raj Chetty 16 of Harvard University finds that a 1 standard deviation increase in shorter commuting times leads to a 10% increase in incomes for median and lower class earners. Second, prioritizing increased spending on public infrastructure creates jobs. Daniel Alpert 16 of Third Way calculates that both the direct jobs created by construction and the induced jobs created by increased spending, a $1.2 trillion increase in public infrastructure spending will create 5.5 million new jobs for the economy annually. Infrastructure jobs are critical in the fight against income inequality because creating more employment causes employers to raise their wages to attract workers from going elsewhere. In fact, Dean Baker 13 of the Center for Economic and Policy Research finds that each 1% increase in employment for the lower class increases wages for all low-income workers by 1%, the median class see half the effects, and the rich see no gain in income. Ultimately, Daniel Alpert 2016 of Third Way writes, in order to reduce the levels of income inequality in the U.S., there is one thing we need to do above all else: enable job creation via an intense revitalization of our public infrastructure via public sector spending. Contention 2 is homeless to hopeful. Josh Leopold of the Urban Institute in 2015 found that nationwide only 28 adequate and affordable units are available for every 100 renter households with incomes at or below 30% of the area median income. That a single county in the United States has enough affordable housing for all its renters. Increased spending on affordable housing infrastructure would solve that gap and alleviate income inequality in 4 ways. First, building affordable housing attracts and creates jobs. Keith Wardrop of the Center for Housing and Policy finds in 2011 that development of affordable housing increases spending and employment in the surrounding economy. Without a sufficient supply of affordable housing, employers and entire regional economies can be at a competitive disadvantage. The National Association of Home Builders estimates that building 100 new low-income housing tax credit units for families leads to the creation of 80 jobs from direct spending and 42 from induced spending. Second, erecting new affordable housing programs includes the abatement of lead paint as seen under Senator Kristen Gillibrand's Plan for New Housing in 2015. This is critical because Anna Azer from Brown University finds that removing lead paint in the home could reduce the black-white test score gap by 37 to 76% in 2015. Azer furthers that eliminating black-white disparities in test scores would dramatically reduce not only educational inequality, but economic inequality as well. Third is alleviating homelessness. Scott Carey of Brother Jones writes in 2015 that policies to construct affordable housing in Utah have reduced homelessness by 72%. Reducing homelessness is critical to alleviating income inequality. Matthew Rodney of MIT finds in 2014 that the main driver of income inequality in the past 40 years has been access to housing for the rich. This is because housing provides a stable long-term investment on which families and communities can thrive. The Nevada Rural Housing Authority explains that the opportunity of housing for poor and middle-income earners enables access to the most significant way wealth is created for low and middle-income communities. Fourth, increasing the supply of affordable housing decreases overall housing costs for everyone in the community. Benjamin Powell of Reason explains in 2015 that the real cause of affordable housing shortages is the shortage of overall housing caused by government restrictions on supply. The solution is to allow more construction. When the supply of homes increases, existing homeowners often upgrade to the newly constructed homes. Jamie Davenport of Illinois Wesleyan quantifies in 2003 that as vacancy rates of rental units increase by 1%, the percent of cost-burdened households decreases by 0.5%. Davenport continues that decreasing cost of rent is critical to opening up income to spend on food, clothing, and healthcare. Those reasons we negate or affirm. Whoops. Oh, it's. Oh, you're good. Yeah. All right.
So what's your advocacy? Like, what happens if we vote affirmative?
We prioritize increased spending on public infrastructure.
No, like, okay, so you have a lot of different ways to access your impacts. So
I disagree.
what specifically happens if we affirm? Like, getting
prioritize increased access to increased spending on public infrastructure. You could define public infrastructure to be the programs that we discussed in this case.
So, like,
We also say-
every prong of your case is linked back to prioritizing infrastructure, and you won't kick out of any of them.
No, we will not kick out of them.
Okay. You can get a question.
Cool. So let's talk about your first contention on like the supremacy thing, right? So is the reason why this sort of infrastructure construction occurs because of like racial bias?
Partially, but I think it's more about governments and where they want to send funding and how it benefits them. So governments.
So, but like, what determines what they want to benefit who?
I'm not
Like
sure.
whether or not they're
Really
black or white,
confused.
right? Isn't that
What's
what
the point that you're trying to make? What's the point?
I'm asking, what drives like segregationist infrastructure policy?
Oh, so you're trying to say that, like, you solve for racial biases?
No, I'm not. I'm asking you a question.
Okay, like
what
I don't
causes
know the
biased infrastructure spending?
The Avila evidence just says that infrastructure follows inscriptions of race and class. Like,
Okay.
I guess there is no warrant.
So, like, if infrastructure spending would no longer do that, right? If we had policies that prevent that from occurring, and we have people in power who don't want that to occur, then you wouldn't see those same sort of racial biases
I mean,
dictate
like,
policy,
people
correct?
in power.
It's just a yes or no question.
I mean, no. If people in power come out and say that they don't want to discriminate anymore, that doesn't mean that they're going to stop.
If we prove examples of that they're not discriminating anymore, would that work?
I'd love to see the examples, but I'm not going to say yes.
Yeah,
and
sure.
Show me evidence you're going to win.
Okay, so but if we do prove that we have examples, like,
Okay,
sure. You have a question?
Yeah, okay, so you talked about creating jobs, like a lot of places in your case, right? So can you show me evidence that these jobs are going to workers who did not have jobs in the past?
Sure, so the Chicago Booth School explains that one of the main causes of income inequality is the fact that globalization has pushed old manufacturing workers out of their jobs.
Not responding to my question. I'm asking,
if you let me finish, I'll respond.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
They then continue to say that those old manufacturing workers who have lost so much of their wages, which is why middle class incomes have stagnated, those same people could go back to work in the construction sector, and then those construction sector jobs would have more jobs than do.
No, that's not what I was asking. I was asking if we pass these policies, do those new jobs go to these manufacturing workers that are unemployed?
Chicago Booth
Your
says
evidence just says that like they.
Have you read my evidence?
You just recited it to me. It took like 30 seconds. To do
Right.
that.
I'm saying my evidence says that the manufacturing people, the old manufacturing workers.
Okay, so why would
these jobs.
why would like the construction sector prefer these like old manufacturing workers when they could just say construction workers from like old like?
Because there's not enough construction workers right now.
Okay,
There's an undersupply of investment in infrastructure,
We'll show that
if we
there is-
reinvest, we create more construction.
We'll show that
That's
there
a
are enough
question.
workers. Yeah.
Okay, so why do we need marriage to have stable families?
Right. So like the Yoshikawa evidence makes us
Your
very
Yoshikawa evidence says increased spending on welfare, only increase it's like
Okay, I might
$1,000.
sorry, not Yoshikawa. Sorry, Kuntz says that stable family formation is the biggest driver
Why?
of inequality. Well, sorry, like
Like in the modern world, you
Okay,
don't have to
wait,
be
wait,
married to have like a stable
No, no, no.
relationship.
okay,
This is in the 1960s.
That's an argument you can make, but like we tell you like having a stable marriage like increases stability.
I can see that.
Actually, can I help some stuff?
Yeah, sure, go for it.
What was it? The Chicago Red Booth or something?
Yeah, got you.
Yeah, I'd just like to say that. That's it.
That's it. All right.
Can you pull that up?
Yeah. And at the same time, can you get the other card? The marriage is the foundational.
Oh no. We don't have a card for that. We have a card saying that it's the most robust predictor. You want to see that?
Yeah, that works.
That's what I meant to say.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah. No worries.
Oops, what happened? Oh, here you go.
And where's the timer now?
Oh, here's the time, by the way.
Pause.
I like 5 seconds.
Yeah. We'll just keep running it.
No, it's good.
Wait, can I get that other card?
Can you get it while I'm waiting?
Yeah, sure.
So yeah, 5 seconds.
Everyone good? For the judges, it'll just be down in the affirmative case. Okay. On contention 1 on jobs, they say that infrastructure has a D+ grade. And what Kristen Marsh of the Media Research Center says is that the ASCE always gives the U.S. infrastructure poor grades. It's no surprise that as an engineering group that lobbies for its cause, the ASCE benefits directly from increased government spending on infrastructure. They claim that the U.S. government is projected to underinvest in infrastructure by half, but that's just a politically motivated statement to get more money. Don't evaluate it. Their first link into jobs is accessibility, but the first response is that the status quo stalls. The American Road Builders Association finds that recent government efforts have led to a net decrease in nationwide structural deficiency in infrastructure and an increase in available transit everywhere. There's no need to prioritize. We're doing that now. And second, Wendell Cox of the Institute for Economic Policy explains that transit accessibility is useless for the vast majority of people because in suburban municipalities where 94% of jobs are located, only 2.4% of commuters use transit, as most local jobs are easily accessible. This explains why Joelle Cotton of Forbes finds that in most cities where new transit lines have been built, they fail to have seen increases in the share of commuters taking public transportation. The second link is construction jobs. Mitigate that impact in 2 ways. First, James Shirk of the Center for Data Analysis reports that most workers hired on new federal construction projects come from existing projects, not unemployment lines. They read you the Chicago booth evidence saying that people who used to work in manufacturing could be used for infrastructure, not that they will. We say employers would probably prefer people who actually have experience working on construction jobs. Our analysis comes first. But second, USA Today finds that part-time workers are filling most new job openings in the construction sector due to the volatility of labor demand. These workers have less job security. They disappear after the project's done. They have no impacts. But then, these jobs are not good at all. Brian Hawken of UC Davis writes that low-wage unemployment may worsen inequality by trapping the poor and making upward mobility impossible. Infrastructure does exactly that. There's 2 warrants. First, informal employment. Yvonne Liu of the PRO observed that compared to other sectors, infrastructure employers are twice as likely to keep workers on classified unofficial payrolls. Unfortunately, these informal workers earn half of what their formal counterparts make and are 3 times more likely to live in poverty. But check out the WTO further that informal workers have fewer opportunities for formal education and human capital growth, which is why a 3% increase in the size of the informal economy raises income inequality by 8%. Second is P3s. Galenovich of Yale indicates that governments allocate funding to new projects by contracting out construction to private businesses in what's known as a public-private partnership, or P3. This is bad because the Partnership for Working Families writes that private companies naturally seek to maximize profit, which incentivizes cutting wages to reduce costs. As a result, the Organization for the American Way finds that only 8% of contracted workers earned enough to rise above the poverty threshold. Turn the argument, go to Contention 2 about the LIHCC program. 2 topicality issues. First, this is literally a low-income house tax program. The California State Treasury says only after all income asset information is obtained and calculated and all qualified sources of income are added to derive the total can people access this program. It's a means-tested infrastructure grant. Not everyone can use the houses. It's not accessible for everyone. It's not public infrastructure. Then, don't prioritize. Michael Garadovich of the Journal of Tax Credits writes that in the fiscal year 2016 budget proposal, there has been a marked $4 billion increase in this exact program. You don't have to do it because it's already been done. But second, Amnesty International says that 3.5 million people in the U.S. are homeless. It is worth noting that at the same time, there are 18.5 million vacant homes in the country. The problem isn't the lack of housing, it's affordability, and the social safety net solves that. On impacts, first they talk about jobs. Their job creation evidence relies on the internal link of construction. You can extend both SHRP and the USA Today evidence that we read earlier. Second, on lead paint. Two responses. First, when they say removing lead reduces the black-white achievement gap by 76%, they're lying to you. What their evidence actually says is, quote, there is a 1.1 to 2.2 point reduction in the black-white test score gap. Their impact is literally a 1% reduction in test scores. They can prove that outweighs their case. But second, the status quo solves. Fowler of the Science Project magazine writes that in the 1976, the Consumer Product Safety Commission effectively banned lead paint and has actively been going out and repairing houses with lead paint in them for free. The status quo, again, is solving. You don't have to prioritize. And third is homelessness. Their report about Utah says the state decreased the number of homeless by 72%, largely by, quote, finding apartments where people can live. Not building, but finding accessible places for people to stay. It's not a reason to affirm, especially because their impacts, first of all, are non-topical, and second of all, their impact evidence doesn't even talk about the advocacy that they're proposing. At the end of the day, you go for child poverty and alleviating the cycle of intergenerational inequality, and thus we strongly urge you to negate.
Can you give me the date on the increase in investment in sponsor second contention? Like the date of when that investment?
The 2016 fiscal year.
And then can I also see like that like construction jobs will be informal?
Yeah. Or they're 2 times more likely.
Sure, that works.
Do you want me to just put on the flash drive?
Yeah.
Here.
Thanks. Give us a second. Is it Hawken again? Yeah, okay. Yeah, on. Oh, okay, we'll start from now. Okay, can I keep looking at this? Yeah, I can. Okay, just, yeah. How much time do you have? I have a minute 30 left. Left? Yeah, okay. Minute 3? Sorry? Minute 30. Minute 30. Okay, sorry, I'm writing down. So this is going to start off with a general overview. You can put it on both case and relief and then down to the case. So starting off in today's debate, remember what the resolution is asking us is attacking income inequality. What National Affairs explains to you is to truly attack income inequality, we need broad-based wage growth for people to have sustainable wage to rise themselves up the economic ladder. When my opponents talk about all these welfare programs, and I'll talk about this more in the second contention, they're not actually fighting income inequality. All they're doing is helping people stay at the bottom. They're not bringing them up. With that being said, let's go down to my opponent's case, starting off with their first contention about entrenching supremacy. Recognize a lot of the things we're talking about here are outdated. What NPO reports to you is in states like New York, Massachusetts, and Texas, we're actually seeing reforms for people. We're like the
head of the U.S. Department of Highway and Transportation is saying we're going to be investing into poor areas if we've underinvested in those places before, so we're not seeing this problem of going into rich areas happening. But secondly, look at the fact that the Supreme Court decision in 2015 restricted all these zoning laws and stuff. They talk about discriminatory practices that stop the poor people. They no longer exist. What Ozan and I are telling you is they're talking about problems in the past and policy today solves for that. And now that we've solved for those policy inadequacies, let's invest in the infrastructure and give them the access that they need. Thirdly, they talk about this idea at the bottom of 53% of people are homeless. One, recognize they provide you with no solvency on this issue. If homelessness is such a big issue, we should be constructing affordable housing, which decreases homelessness as a whole. When they do nothing for that problem, you prefer the affirmative because at least you get a risk of solvency. And finally, recognize on this idea of displacement justification, just from a fundamental policy perspective, it doesn't really make sense. Because I'm displacing my constituents, those constituents will no longer vote for me, and they're not likely to get reelected. At a simple logical basis, an argument isn't adding up for them. Then on their second contention, they talk about breaking the cycle, starting off on their first point about poverty. One very important thing to recognize, according to the New York Times, welfare programs don't lift people out of poverty. They just keep them fluctuating, right? Like maybe one year they go $1,000 above the poverty line, and the next year they're under the poverty line. That literally has no impact on income inequality. But the second general overview response is they never give you a reason to prioritize. All they do in this entire convention is say, look at all this stuff that welfare programs does, that's good. Why is that a reason for me to increase spending if they're already able to do all this stuff in the status quo? Now on to the more specifics. So they talk about how child poverty is very important. For one, recognize that a child's income and child's outcomes is inherently tied to their parents' income. Insofar as we provide jobs from parents, 5.5 million exactly, which doesn't really touch upon that specific statistic in its rebuttal, we're helping the children as well by providing them with better disposable income, more disposable income. Then on the more specific advocacies, one, they talk about food insecurity. Recognize that SNAPs and the food insecurity and welfare programs don't solve for that. Empirically, what the Center of Budget and Policy finds, that SNAPs create dependence for 8.5 years, so one, that links into what I said, that doesn't fight income inequality, and two, it doesn't actually help food insecurity, because what the New York Times reports to you is that 25 million Americans live in food deserts. It doesn't matter if I have a SNAP program if there's not literally a grocery store for me to get food. We're the only ones that solve for that by creating that type of infrastructure by increasing access. But thirdly, recognize what the Think Progress reports to you is to use SNAP, use what's called an electronic business transfer card. Every time you swipe that card, the people making money off of it are JP Morgan and Chase, and insofar as income inequality is caused by the top 1% getting more money, they're entrenching that cycle. On healthcare, Obamacare is already solving. And finally, at the end of the day, they say 47% of basic needs are provided by welfare. They never give me a reason to increase that if they're already doing it, make them show them. Then on the second subpoint, they talk about family formation. Again, they're living in the 60s here. Women do not need husbands in order to have a stable family. I do not need to be married in order to have a stable relationship. Ozan and I aren't married, and I think we have a pretty stable relationship right now. Fundamentally, what they're doing in this contention is actually decreasing marriage and decreasing stability as a whole, because what they encourage is single-parent household. What Robert Reckner from the Heritage Foundation explains is because welfare programs penalize marriage and penalize people for making more money, it encourages people to have single-parent households. Why that's very important? Because when they tell you single-parent households cause all this income inequality at the bottom, they're entrenching that cycle. But secondly, recognize that if you want to increase a person's income, the fundamental way you do that is by providing them with a job, not just giving them welfare that they become dependent on and discourages increased labor. At the end of the day, because Ozan and I are giving you sustainable ways to fight income inequality, while they're giving you sustainable ways to keep people at the bottom, you should be affirmed.
Let's just go ahead and start. You want to just use your... Actually, mine is less correct. Alright. Do you mind if I take the first question? Okay, so I know you and Ozan have a stable relationship, but are you raising a child?
Yeah. No, we're not.
Okay, and do you know what the difference between raising a child and not raising a child does to a stable relationship?
Probably makes
It increases the cost of living because you have to have a shared income to raise that child, right?
So when you disincentivize marriage, aren't you making the problem worse?
Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
You cite Robert Rector of the Heritage Foundation. Now, what is his background in terms of welfare?
He's the
He
leading
has been an
expert on
activist.
youth-tested welfare.
He's been an activist and a lobbyist in trying to get welfare reductions in the government. He works with the Heritage Foundation,
Yes.
a libertarian think tank that is funded by the
What
rich
he's
in order to...
saying- Robert Rector is an advocate for means-tested welfare, like you say. He talks about expanding the program. And what's very important is he's talking about how your own advocacy...
Where does he talk about expanding the program?
Republicans understand we're going to have welfare. They prefer it to have it, and what Rector talks about is having
That
it in a
didn't answer
means-tested
my
way
question.
than having Social Security.
that
which is
didn't
why
answer
they
my
advocate
question.
for it.
Where does he talk about expanding means sensible?
Like what I'd say.
Can you hand me a piece of evidence after this speech that says that?
I can hand you a piece of evidence to say that Republicans on the whole,
Okay,
like
Robert.
Would you talk about Rector's credentials being a problem because he's a Republican?
No, that's not why. It's because he
Then why
works
is
for the Heritage Foundation, funded by like the Koch Industries and like a bunch of other like big oil
They're
fossil
like
fuels for
conservative
rich people
people,
who
right?
want to
They're
have their interests protected. They don't want an increase in redistributive tax profits. Like they don't want to pay more taxes. They don't want to lose their income. Is the Heritage Foundation a conservative think tank? Yeah.
Yes. So if we can show you that conservative values advocate. Wait,
No.
why does that not
Because
matter?
not all conservatives get millions of dollars from like Robert Koch, right?
Well, most conservatives actually do get tons of money from like investment.
I say
investment
Koch.
My
bad. Anyways,
ask you a question.
go ahead.
So when you talk about this idea in response to contention, right, about like construction jobs giving to people who already have jobs, right?
That's
how does that take
first
out?
contention, but
Yeah, I'm sorry. But how does that take out it at the warrant level about creating a tighter economy?
I mean, like, if you don't employ more people, then you don't make more job openings. That doesn't tighten the labor.
No. Because you talk about this idea, like if we're still giving jobs to more people, right?
Okay, here. Let's rephrase this. I get where you're going.
Like if
right?
we're increasing
I get where you're going.
inherently, we still need to hire
So-
more people.
Insofar as you haven't read evidence yet quantifying the effect of the tightening of that labor market, if you can do it in the next speech, then you'll make a better response.
That's our case.
No, you just say that like 5.5 million jobs are created. You don't tell me what that does in terms of wages across the market.
No, yes we do. We tell you empirically that those 5.5 million jobs create a 1% increase in wages for everyone in the lower and middle class.
The Baker analysis does two things wrong. The Baker analysis first assumes that employment is a median income. Right? This is the evidence that says a 1 to 1% analysis, right?
Yeah.
Yes, the Baker analysis does two things wrong. One, he assumes that all jobs that are created are median income. We say that they are not median income, there's not enough money. But two, he looks at multiple different countries across different periods, including like the 18th century, right? Like it's not a reason to buy the Baker analysis.
I really want to focus on that first thing. What do you mean like those jobs aren't medium income?
Okay,
not enough money?
So what Baker does is he says a 1% increase in employment leads to a decrease in increase in wages. But those wages are calculated based on the assumption that the jobs that are created are median income paying.
We'll take a look at that.
Yeah, we haven't used it.
Those are my keys.
Oh, my bad.
Keep calling for cards, but can I see the PPP evidence?
Yeah.
45 seconds each you pause.
Just both of the cards that are read? Or all three, sorry?
Yeah, sure. That if you can get them.
Yeah. And just like I can do that right now.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I got it now. Okay. And what was that? Thanks. 45 change will be fine. Done. Alright, 2 minutes left. So a minute left. Where's the ticket?
Okay, so I'm gonna respond to their overview from the rebuttal, your defense on our second contention, and then extend terms on their case.
Wait, sorry, can you repeat that?
Start with your
Rebuttal overview?
yeah, okay, and then defense on our second contention, and then terms on your case. Cool. Okay. They say that wage growth is a prerequisite to countering income inequality, but Lieber tells you that welfare is a prerequisite to attaining jobs in the first place, because in the short term, if families find it hard to stay afloat, they make ill-advised short-term decisions that banish them into a permanent poverty trap. So unless you use welfare first, they can't even get these jobs in the first place. Now go to our second condition. The first thing he said is the New York Times said that welfare doesn't lift people out of poverty completely, but this only happens if they don't get a job. But the Justico evidence says that they find jobs because welfare lets you pay for your basic needs. And then they ask us why we should prioritize. They clearly didn't listen to the first part of the argument. The Cohen evidence says that we are billions of dollars short of the current proposals for these programs that we talked about. Then they say that they give jobs to parents as well, but they don't respond to any of the responses that Max puts on their case. First, the Liu evidence says that informal employees are paid half as much and have 3 times as much likelihood of poverty, and the Vachetta evidence says that there's a 3% increase in informal economy, increases income inequality by 8%, and the OAW evidence says that P3s only pay 8% of workers enough to overcome poverty, and finally, Kaplan evidence says once you get these jobs, you're trapped because you have no opportunity for formal education. Unless they respond to those responses, they can't be making that cross application. Then they talk about food deserts. We never mentioned the word SNAP, and they talk about dependency, but we say that most people get off welfare within 3 years. And now on family makeup, first of all, they don't read any card when responding to this argument. Our Kuhn's evidence, which is actually a cited card by an author, says that economic insecurity leads to decreased family formation, and not actual marriages, just decreased stable families. Even if they're in love and get married, they become unstable and break apart. And finally, they say that marriages are like penalized, but the Urban Institute points out that 37 states have removed marriage penalties on two-parent families' eligibility, so the problem is going away already, and they're going to start extending that. Finally, upward mobility outweighs employment, because even if we get every poor person a minimum wage job, it's not going to close the gap between the rich and the poor. The first is child poverty. Jobs that create are low income, so as the CDF says, children are still 3 times as likely to fall back into poverty. In the long term, these children are excluded from upward mobility, but on family formation, Perry tells you that if it weren't for the welfare state, income inequality would be 50% higher, and Wilcox tells you that stable family structures are the strongest predictors of income inequality. For these reasons, I strongly urge you to vote for the con.
Okay. We'll start right now. Okay, thank you.
How much did I get for?
24.
44.
24. Okay. Alright. It's gonna be this like Lieber, like broad-based radio stuff. And then jobs.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
So like the Lieber wage growth stuff where we have that debate.
Yeah.
And then jobs. I'll just sign this once I get past Lieber, right? Everyone ready? Alright. Starting on Lieber, they say welfare is a prerequisite. Welfare does not go away in the affirmative world. It still exists. They meet some basic needs. You can have a job even if you don't have all your basic needs met. This argument is completely ridiculous. But then, go to our first contention on jobs. Their first response is that it's like they say that the workers aren't good enough. Even if we are getting more workers into the industry, that is good. Even if they were formerly part-time, we are tightening the labor economy, we are increasing full employment, that's what matters. But then, their main substance response here is first the informal economy. Their evidence on this is from California. They show nothing about a national trend. But then more importantly, their evidence that says it increases income inequality is from developing countries, nothing to do with America. Then they go on to PPPs. They say PPPs maximize profit, but an Obama executive order of last year says that PPPs have to contract collective bargaining agreements so they can bargain for their wages. That means that there's no massive decrease in wages like they're talking about. But then moreover, PPPs are not likely at all because of the fact that the infrastructure projects now are funded through block grants, not PPPs. There's no trend here. But then, remember, the ultimate impact here, even if it's mitigated, is that we create 5.5 million new jobs every single year for the next 5 years. The reason that's incredibly important is because they don't respond to the fact that every 1% increase in employment increases wages for middle and low income earners by 1%. That's critical because that is literally on scope the biggest impact in the round because we give jobs to whatever their parents want and we give jobs to child poverty. Because even if child poverty is an issue, every single person who is middle or low wage who has a job gets to rise up on scope, on simple scope right there. We actually alleviate the gap between the middle and the rich on a broad-based issue. That is the easiest place for you to sign your ballot. Then go to their contention about this issue of stable marriages. Couple of responses they drop here. So one, Amar explains to you the logic from Robert Rector as to why welfare goes down, but the NIH explains that increased welfare actually still does decrease and decrease stable relations by 4.2%. They're not actually responding to the logic here. But then moreover, recognize the fact that their contention just simply does not make sense in any sort of contextual way. The reason for that is that even if child poverty does go down, it doesn't matter because the rich are still 3 times as likely to be rich 1 year after another. Even if they do somehow improve social mobility, we are the only ones who are actually increasing earnings broad-based across the board for every single individual on scope. That is the most important impact in the round because we are actually creating sustainability here. Their welfare programs don't do anything to actually create any sort of sustainable impact. We are the only ones in the affirmative world who can do that.
Sorry. Is ready for cross-sex?
Yeah.
Alright, so how does the rich get richer in our world?
We're not saying the rich get richer. We're saying that.
Why
Well,
does
the
it-
rich do get richer, inherently.
None of us are reigning in the rich.
okay, so if the rich why do you show evidence?
You guys say that the
What's
social
that? Let me ask
mobility
my question.
issue. Your guys say that the social mobility issue is that you're 3 times as likely to be poor if you're poor
Yes.
and poor, right?
Yeah.
But the same thing applies to the rich. That doesn't change in either
Alright,
world.
so the
Can I ask a
welfare is
question?
let me just defend that real quick. Welfare is the only progressive system that taxes the rich and brings money to the poor. So if the poor go up, the rich have to go down.
Wait, but
you don't read any evidence that
quantifies how much that happens.
And if you make that argument in final focus, that's really not fair to us. I want to ask a question.
Yeah.
But how many people are within child poverty? How many people are you solving?
1 in 5 children.
But okay, so how many is that?
CDF evidence.
I want a raw number.
I mean, probably 12 million. I think
Okay,
that's
12
what the
million.
evidence says.
So if we're
that's
if we're increasing wage growth across the board,
No.
for every single working
Okay,
family,
but you don't get
Is
access
that
to
not
that
the
impact.
amount
You don't
of
get
quality?
access to the impact because
Why?
1, you don't respond to the Shirk analysis saying that we're just taking jobs from existing projects. 2, you don't respond to the index
Wait,
to Baker,
so
which is how you
that's-
get the wage
that's-
growth, right?
That's kind of silly, guys. Because obviously, if we're increasing investment in infrastructure, we need to create new jobs, right? Because the number of
You probably should have said this in your summary.
Right.
So that's exactly what he did say in his summary. That's what we talk about with the
I'm
feedback,
saying-
right? It's a fundamental idea. If I'm investing more in the industry, I inherently am creating more jobs into that industry.
You're creating
and
more
that's-
jobs.
There's no way
They're
that's not
built
responsive to the
with the
argument,
same
guys. I
people
don't need to respond to that argument because it's not responsive to the idea that you need to create new jobs in the affirmative world.
Yeah, you need to, but you don't.
Okay,
You
that's
just asked one. Yeah, so let's talk about your response to our argument saying that you don't have to have stable families. Assuming that divorce happens because the Kym's evidence says because of a lack of financial stability within these households, wouldn't that be a solid reason to say that
improve financial stability in a sustainable way?
cash assistance programs?
Right, but that's not sustainable, right? If I don't have a job, if I don't have the dignity to be able to go to work every single day, if I don't have the ability to say to my kid that I'm working hard for your earnings instead of just getting a check from the government, then that's the difference.
Okay, so you say that job growth is important. We respond to the Libra analysis that you don't sufficiently address that says to get these jobs in the first place. Let me finish.
Yeah,
Okay,
sure.
okay, so to get these jobs in the first place, they need to stay afloat in the short term. So if you're in poverty, you can't get a job. You're in a permanent poverty trap unless you have welfare to go out and look for a job.
No, but what the thing is, you're mischaracterizing the entirety of the affirmative stance, right? You read the Lieber analysis saying, we need welfare in order for people to go get jobs, and I'd agree with that, but you never give me a reason for the expansion of that
Okay,
program,
wait,
right?
so hold on.
Wait,
So
can
you
I
do
finish-
agree?
Can I finish my response?
Yeah, I
But
know what you're saying, right?
No, because welfare is already helping people survive. Now we need to help people get jobs, not just survive
Okay,
at the
but
bottom.
you do agree, right? Because I just want to go back to what you said earlier. Let's backtrack a little. You do agree that welfare is necessary for people to get jobs.
No,
and many-
I do
You know
not
what you
agree.
just said?
I don't agree.
But your
I mean, this is clearly not a stable
Okay,
partnership.
our official position is that we do not agree with the Lieber analysis.
Alright, minute, we'll run. there'll be this wage growth argument, and then our second contention. Okay? Everyone good? The broad-based wage growth argument is not true because of the Weber analysis that doesn't get sufficiently responded to, that says that sudden poverty makes people short-sighted, they make ill-advised decisions that make it impossible for them to get a job and trap them in poverty. Now, they say that welfare isn't going away, so we get those impacts anyways, but they don't respond to Cohen, which is in the summary, the final focus, and in the constructive that says that Congress has turned a deaf ear to safety net programs with funding requests for billions of dollars being denied. Those programs are disappearing, it doesn't get responded to, and even then the CDF says that even if there is no deficiency, that expanding welfare still cuts into child poverty by 60%. Insofar as that's true, we show you the impetus for why you need to do so, and the Weber analysis says that if we don't do anything, then these people will have no ability to get a job because they will be too busy dealing with their basic needs. That means their entire argument about creating wage growth is completely irrelevant because we have a prerequisite on it. Then they also don't respond to the Baker Indictment that says that it assumes that jobs are created with medium wage, and also they're from different countries and time areas. But now let's go to our second contention. Upward mobility, like we say, always outweighs employment because even if we give every person a job, it's not going to close the gap between the rich and the poor. You need to create mobility. This is especially true under the Hawken analysis. Once you get jobs, you're trapped because you have no opportunity for formal education or human capital development, specifically with the infrastructure jobs that they talk about. If they extend that, you should be voting for us. So they, on the Liu analysis, we specifically say even if it is in California, the warrant is still the same everywhere, that informal employees are paid half as much, and as a result, they are 3 times more likely to fall into poverty, and that's the most important implication that these trends have on the case because even with jobs, families are still poor. This links into the CDF evidence that says that children are 3 times more likely to fall back into poverty at some point in their life if they fell into poverty originally or if they experienced it whatsoever. This means that we impact to intergenerational poverty. We solve for poverty in the long run. You expand the program like we've talked about, reducing child poverty by 60% reaches generations far longer than their wage growth impacts can. We outweigh on time frame. But now quickly on family structures, remember that even if we don't show you that stable family housing requires marriage, that with poverty families break apart, and as a result that creates neurological developments to be inhibited, which is an irreversible impact on these children. It makes them incapable of getting a good education and finding a good job in the future, which again links back into the intergenerational poverty framework. At the end of the day, they don't respond to the response that we make to their arguments, and this is why we strongly urge vote for the con. Thank you.
All my judges, opponents.
Ozan and I have talked about our differences and realized the Weber analysis is factually untrue. The reason behind that idea is what we explain to you continually, is that they talk about sudden poverty with the Weber analysis, but they never prove to me people are going into sudden instances of poverty. And at the end of the day, think about it like this, where I tell you right at the beginning of our rebuttal, just lifting someone $1,000 over the poverty line doesn't change anything fundamentally in their life, right? To actually change people's lives, what you need to do is give them jobs that equip them for sustainable growth in the future. All they're doing is keeping people surviving at the bottom. They never ever impact to actually pulling people up to fight income inequality. 2 places you vote for us. First is on the turns on mayors that they drop. 2, this is really important for a couple of reasons. 1, they completely drop the statistic Ozan reads to you that welfare programs from NIH decrease marriage by 4.2%. Why that's very important? Because when they talk about sustainable intergenerational poverty, when they're decreasing stable families inherently through welfare programs because it discourages marriage, and when they're decreasing it, people going out to get wages because I have to lose my welfare once I get more wages, they're inherently making the problem worse. They're not solving for poverty, they're keeping people in poverty. But the real place you can vote for us is very simply on jobs, and a lot of Ozan's summary goes unresponded to here. He talked about this idea of the informal economy, but what Ozan explains to you is that an executive action from Obama in 2015 forces people to engage in collective bargaining agreements. Why that's very important is because you can't have the informal economy exist when you're engaging in collective bargaining agreements with unions when you're using stuff like the E-Verify system. Why that is crucially important is the idea because we create jobs. That's logically untrue that if we invested in more infrastructure, we would not create more jobs. And why those jobs are crucially important are for 2 ways and outweigh everything on scope. The first of which is they go to everyone. When we impact everyone, and all they're doing is impacting the people on welfare, we impact middle and low-income people, we're outweighing them on scope, and the way we do that is by creating a tighter economy. Empirically, what we show you is we create 5.5 million jobs and a tighter economy, when people are competing for wages, we see a 1% wage increase for everyone. Ozone explains that to summary and they never respond to that. That's the biggest impact in today's debate because it leads to broad wage ratios, it leads to families being able to be more stable, falling into the economic instability they talk about.
Programs with funding requests for welfare billions of dollars below the budgetary requests. Prioritizing welfare solves intergenerational poverty. This happens in two ways, and the first is child poverty. Greenstein of the Center for Budget and Policy Priorities explains that welfare helps families with children afford basic necessities to improve longer-term outcomes. The safety net reduces the burst of stress factors that parents and children experience if they can't put food on the table, thereby easing negative effects that poverty has on neurological development early in life. Luckily, Just Go Stanford explains that the safety net covers around 47% of financial support necessary to cover an entire family's basic necessities, freeing up time and resources that can be refocused towards job searches and education. The Public Policy Institute of California adds that safety net programs ameliorate issues like food insecurity, homelessness, and inadequate health care, all of which hurt children disproportionately. DeLuca of the Century Foundation continues that welfare prevents social reproduction, where children are stuck in the same social class as their parents. The CDF thus indicates that expanding underfunded welfare programs would cut child poverty by 60% and increase access to resources for 43 million kids. On the long term, people are 3 times more likely to fall back into poverty after being poor early in life. But the second is family makeup. The St. John's Law Review notes the reason behind declining marriage rates in America is an increased incidence of poverty. Coons of CNN warns that economic insecurity makes family formation less likely and family dissolution more likely, as couples are unwilling to marry if they don't have the financial independence necessary to move into a new home or bear the cost of child rearing. McLanahan of Princeton thus writes that reducing incidences of poverty with single mothers is the most effective tool for protecting children from the negative consequences of family disruption, and that if unmarried individuals were more economically secure, they would take more time in deliberating relationships, finding better partners, and making remarriage more feasible. Yoshikawa of NYU notes that a $1,000 boost in welfare generosity is associated with a 108% increase in the incidence of stable family formation. Wilcox of Slate.
Wait, have you shown one in PDF or is it just the card?
I was trying to PDF, but I can just put the card.
No, the card is fine. Sorry.
Okay.
Here.
And the file name is called Hawken.
Let me know if you have trouble with it.
Yeah, sure.
Do the judges mind if I just not take prep while I'm opening up the document?
Yeah, it's... Sorry that took a while.
No worries. Yeah, it's open document. We'll start taking prep now. Alright, thanks. Good 10 seconds used.
You guys are gonna keep track of your own what you've used, right?
Wait down. Alright. I'm ready. Amar and I affirm in Contention 1 is America works. Revitalizing America's infrastructure can create and enable access to good jobs for Americans everywhere. Currently, the American Society for Civil Engineers gives America's infrastructure a D+ rating, and the U.S. government is still projected to underinvest by nearly half the total cost needed. This crisis presents a crucial opportunity to address the failure of markets to produce meaningful employment. Dean Baker 13 of the Center for Economic and Policy Research explains that while there is a sufficient amount of skilled and unskilled workers to fill jobs, the market is not providing enough gainful employment opportunities for all comers into the workforce. Addressing the poor state of our infrastructure in a period of high unemployment would be the perfect marriage of demand and supply. Prioritizing increased spending on public infrastructure alleviates income inequality in 2 ways. First, Gillian White writes for The Atlantic in 2015 that investment in public infrastructure and public transit disproportionately prevents the poor from access to economic opportunity and re-entrenches it due to its inefficiency and infrequent access. Michaela Bouchard 15 of the New York Times adds, for many low-income people, commuting time has emerged as the single strongest factor in the odds of escaping poverty. Strength Clear 14 of the Washington Post writes that increased spending on public infrastructure would make our roads great again, decreasing commute times by, for example, expanding the reach of subways and bus services in cities. Raj Chetty 16 of Harvard University finds that a 1 standard deviation increase in shorter commuting times leads to a 10% increase in incomes for median and lower class earners. Second, prioritizing increased spending on public infrastructure creates jobs. Daniel Alpert 16 of Third Way calculates that both the direct jobs created by construction and the induced jobs created by increased spending, a $1.2 trillion increase in public infrastructure spending will create 5.5 million new jobs for the economy annually. Infrastructure jobs are critical in the fight against income inequality.
Okay, there's everybody. Negate. Contention 1 is entrenching supremacy. Bullard of Texas Southern University writes that for the last few decades, racial prejudice has been the principal decision maker behind infrastructure-related policies in the United States. Historically, the New York Times explains that government housing policies have pushed minorities into segregated inner-city neighborhoods with high poverty rates and few opportunities for escape. According to McCarthy of Smith College, this ongoing American legacy of institutional racism has denied millions of blacks the infrastructure necessary to address unemployment, political exploitation, and other social problems. Prioritizing infrastructure magnifies this oppression in 2 ways. The first is the distribution gap. Avila of the University of Minnesota argues that the financing of infrastructure follows the inscriptions of race and class. While spending within affluent communities is generous, it is minimal or absent in regions where the poor are historically concentrated. Randazzo of the Reason Foundation confirms that more than 85% of all government infrastructure grants went to communities with household incomes far above the national average. The second is urban dislocation. Soman of George Mason University observes that governments typically use new infrastructure projects as excuses to target and remove racial minorities. Lipsitz of UC Santa Barbara empirically confirms that federally assisted renewal projects destroy black housing units 2 times more often than white ones. Dislocation intensifies inequality, as Hartman of the American Bar Association points out that the cost of living for those forced out of their homes is 53% higher. Contention 2 is breaking the cycle. Pettinger of the Center for Economic Health contends that the primary purpose of welfare is to maintain a minimum standard of living for those suffering difficult times to foster upward mobility later down the road. However, Cohen of the nonprofit Quarterly reports that Congress has turned a deaf ear to safety net approach. They find that in comparison to every other manageable influence on inequality, family structure is by far the strongest and most robust predictor of upward mobility. Because children from stable 2-parent families experience more parental attention and higher household incomes, the U.S. Census Bureau finds that 2 single-parent homes were 4 times more vulnerable to severe poverty. Perry of the AEI writes that without means-tested welfare programs, income inequality would be 50% higher in America. And for all these reasons, we are very proud to engage.
Can I see Yoshihata?
Full PDF if you have it.
I think I only have the card, so I'm fine.
Can you just look up the PDF on the internet? Can you use it right now?
The internet's really bad in here. I can try that.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
It's not really opening. Can I just show you? If you have questions.
Yeah, if we need a PDF, I'll ask for it.
Okay. Let me just. Okay. Can I flash it to you so I can use
That'd be actually really great.
Okay.
And if you want to try looking it up on your computer, maybe it'll work.